Greetings. In this video I'm going to discuss about Python programming. This being an introductory video, we need to talk about the Python interpreter, the IDE, and other things like identifiers, variables, data types. Python is a high-level language which has to be translated to machine code, and for that to happen we need to have a Python interpreter. So open your browser, search for Python website. When you get to the Python website, you download the Python version. The latest one here is Python 3.12. So you download the Python that is compatible with your operating system, and I'm going to download the latest one here for Windows, which is 3.12. After downloading that, here under the download section you will receive a pop-up that is downloaded. So I will go straight to my file explorer to identify my Python file. Then you right click on it, then you open it, as this is the Python installation procedures. The most important thing there is to add python.exe to path, so that you may be able to run Python scripts from your command line. And I'm going to choose install now, which is installing everything. After downloading and installing your Python interpreter, it is time to download an IDE, an integrated development environment, which will provide us with a text editor and other features like debugging, auto-completion. So you can download VS Code by searching for it on your browser. You go to their website, you download the one which is suitable for your operating system, or which can be Windows or Debian or MacBook. Then when you are done with downloading, you right click and open the VS Code, then you accept your agreement. You go to here, you choose the path where you want to install it, and you can choose to add a start menu folder or not. Then the other important thing is it's already added to path, which is good. You can also choose to add these options, and even the desktop icon. You press next, you install your VS Code. Having downloaded your Python interpreter and installing it, having downloaded and installing your IDE, you can create a new folder under the file option. Then you can open that folder. This is the easiest way, because you can always add your Python files in that folder from VS Code. So I'm going to create a dummy folder, an introductory folder, which I'm going to call introduction. Now this folder should be given a Python extension .py, otherwise your Python interpreter will not identify this file as a Python script. Now once you create your file, you can open it, and this is my file. As you can see, it is time for us to get our hands dirty doing the programming. Let's just see if everything is working by writing the following script. Hello world is just a teaser. Having written this,
you can save your file. But using VS Code, you can just click run Python file and the program will be saved. Now, the program we are writing is a console-based program, which means that the values that we are going to see, the output is shown on the console, and here is my output at the bottom. With hello world being displayed at the bottom of our Python program, this means that our interpreter is working well and our Python file is also being executed or translated by the Python interpreter, which you can see here at the bottom. This is a 3.11.3. So you should be able to see your Python interpreter. Right. Having done this, it means that our Python environment is configured. If you want to know the version of your Python, you can come here under the command line, then you can type Python version. This way you can see the Python version that you are using. Of course, on my computer there is a Python 3.11 and this is another Python version that is there. Now it's time for us to talk about Python in detail. But congratulations, you have written your Python file and everything is working. Now, we want to talk about identifiers and variables. Many times as we are writing code, there are pieces of code that we have to give a name. These entities can be functions, can be classes, can be lists, or can be all the data types. So we have to give a name to such entities. The name that we give is called an identifier. You need to make sure that your identifiers are meaningful. For example, when you are storing the name of your cat, you can't just say X is equal to. That is meaningless. The name should relate to the data that you are going to store in it. If it's a function to calculate the sum, make sure you give a proper identifier. Now, what is a variable? Because we said we can give an identifier to a variable. A variable is a memory location. It is a named memory location. It is a method of referring to a value that is stored in memory for later use in the program, which means when we declare a variable, that variable can be used anywhere without needing to remember the value that we stored in it. When a variable is given a value, that value is stored in memory, and the name that we use to reference to the value is the identifier. Whenever we need to store a value, whenever we need also to use a value more than once, it is imperative that we store that value in a variable so that we can always use the variable name instead of cramming the values stored therein. As we are writing our Python programs, we also need to know that they are working based on user data. There are times where when we want to store the data from the user, but we will start by looking at how a programmer can store values in variables and use them in the future. And we call this hard coding a variable value. Let's say, for example, we write the program name is equal to James. I'll explain why this is in quotes later when we talk about data types. The value gems is being assigned to a variable name. So every time that we are going to need to access gems, we can always call name. We can always use name. So the equal sign here is an assignment operator where the value on the right is assigned in our variable with a name on the left. So we can just come now and say print name, and when we do this, you discover that we will see the value gems displayed on our console. So that is the beauty of variables. Every time we need to use gems value, we always have to refer to the variable name, that is name. Do we just name variables in any way? The most difficult part of programming is naming variables. People always struggle to come up with names, but as we said, our names should be meaningful. There are rules that we have to follow as we are naming our variables. Number one, spaces are not permitted. Let's say we want to assign a first name value to a variable, and this is gems. So there is a space here in between. This is not allowed. So what can we do? Should we just combine and say first name? Yes, that works. But there are also other conventions which you can make use of. But if you want to keep this separate, you can make use of a symbol which is an underscore. This means that an underscore is permitted when naming variables. Underscore is the only symbol that is allowed for naming variables. You cannot use a dollar sign. You cannot use any other symbol besides an underscore. This means that all other symbols are not permitted in variable name except underscore. Variable names should not start with a number. Maybe we want to say first student is equal to 5, or first student is equal to Peter. You see, this is not permitted. This is an error. This is not allowed because a variable name cannot start with a number. Variables are case sensitive. For example, if you have a variable name which we have declared at the top, you cannot come and say, oh no, since I have name at the top, I can come and use name with the capital letter N. When you do this and run, you should be able to see an error which say name is not defined. This means that the name with the capital letter N is not known as a variable. What is known is the name with the small letter N. So this means our variables are case sensitive. Having talked about the rules of naming variables, we now need to go to another important aspect of programming, which is called data types. As I promised you that when I put gems in quotes, I said there's a reason why we are doing that. In other programming languages, you have to declare the data type or the type of data before you assign a value in a variable. So you have to declare the variable, giving it a data type. That is not the case in Python. Python dynamically allocates a data type to a variable. It makes use of the value that is assigned in the variable to identify the data type. So no need for you to declare data types in Python. But knowing data types will help you in your programming, is that will be useful is you are going to be doing some arithmetic operations, is you are going to be doing some operations which may not be permitted on a particular data type. So we have to talk about them. We are going to talk, number one, about the string, which is what I already used at the top. We ask ourselves, what is a string? A string is a sequence of characters that is enclosed in a single or double quotes. You've seen me using the hash many times, and you ask yourself, why is he using hash? What is the effect? When you want to comment a single line in Python, you put a hash. Any value on the right of the hash becomes a comment, which means that it is ignored by the Python interpreter during the execution of your program. You can also make use of multi-line comments. For example, you have to then use 3 double quotes or 3 open quotes. You open 3 quotes, you close them, and anything that you put inside this becomes a comment, as long as it is not being assigned to a value, because the triple quotes can be utilized as well in string assignment when your string is going to be more than one line. Now, to assign a string, message is equal to hello world. Right. For this variable, we are assigning a string value hello world to a message. So you have to use quotes. These can be single or double quotes. Both are allowed for strings. Strings are very powerful. Whenever you want to store anything that is not a number, you can make use of strings. Anything that is not a number or a boolean, you can make use of strings. Be it a dollar, be it a symbol, whatever you want to store, just for display or for other use, you can put it in a string. The other data type that we have, okay, we'll talk much about strings later, but for now, just to introduce data types and how they are assigned in variables, let's move on. The other data type is called an integer. An integer, we are talking about a type of data where we are making use of whole numbers. Whole numbers. So every time you want to store a whole number, it means it is an integer. For example, age is 34. We are assigning a value 34 to a variable age. There is no need for quotes for integers. The other data type is called a float. What is a float? A float is any number that is a decimal. So every time you want to store a decimal, your float is your go-to data type. Height is equal to 1,65. So this is a float. Then you can ask me, what's the difference between integers and floats? Integers are whole numbers. They don't have a decimal part. Floats have a decimal part. The next data type we want to talk about is a boolean. A boolean is any value that can be true or false. For example, complete is equal to true. Take note that for the true, the T should be uppercase and everything else should be lowercase. The next one is false. Finished is equal to false, which means we are assigning a false in a variable. I have then to mention that with all these methods, with all these data types, which I've mentioned so far, there is a function that we can use to cast any other data type to another data type, but we will talk about that later. Let's talk about another data type, which are a little bit more, not complicated per se, but they make use of sequences just like strings. And we are going to talk about a list. What is a list? A list is an ordered sequence of elements which are inside square brackets. The values or the elements should be separated by commas. So you can have a list of numbers. You can have a list of strings. Anything inside these square brackets becomes a list. So this is a list of numbers 1 up to 3. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is a list. You can also have a list of strings. Probably it can be for fruits, so we can call it a fruits list. And we can put our fruits: apple, bananas, and oranges. Right, so this is a list of strings. You can put anything in a list, and you need to know that in the way you declare a value as a single variable, you have to put it in a list. An integer is not in quotes, therefore it remains just an integer, but strings should be in quotes, therefore they have to be put in quotes even if they are in an array. The next data type we want to talk about is a tuple. What is a tuple? A tuple is just like a list, but I have to mention that there is a difference between a list and a tuple. A list is mutable. Once it's created, its elements can be modified. And number 2, the elements are ordered. In other words, we are saying that apple is the first element, so its position remains 0. Banana position remains 1, 2 for oranges, because these are a sequence of elements, so the position becomes the index. Very important, but we shall talk about that later. Yet we are saying a tuple is still an ordered list of sequence of numbers, but we are saying these numbers are immutable. Yes, they keep their position, but you cannot change the values after the values have been created. They cannot be modified after the definition. They are enclosed in the parentheses. The next data type is a set. Now we ask ourselves, what is a set? A set is an unordered collection of unique elements which are enclosed in curly brackets and separated by commas. Curly brackets, I repeat, curly brackets, which means we are making use now of curly brackets. For example, num set, we have our curly brackets is 1, 2, and 3. The elements in the set don't have a permanent position. The position can change at any given time. So it's not ordered. Let's talk about the other type, which is called a dictionary. A dictionary. A dictionary is a set of keys and values which are enclosed in curly brackets and separated by colons. So the key and the value are separated by colons. For example, we want to store data about a person. So as we said, we need to make use of curly brackets. Now, for every element in a dictionary, we need a key. The key can be a number, a key can be a string. I'm going to make use of strings as they identify with the data that we want to store. So we can have name. Then we put a full colon, then to say Peter. So the key is name and the value is Peter. For the next element, we need again to put another key, probably age. Then we can say it is 43. Then the next one is job. Then we put a value which is a developer. So this is a dictionary. So these are the basic data types that we had to talk about. But I must say in Python, these are object types. An integer, a string, a list, a set, a dictionary. These are objects in Python. Yes, in other languages we call them data types, but in Python they are objects. Every time you assign a value, the interpreter is going to identify the type of object it is and initialize for it. So we are initializing objects. That is the language of Python. I then need to show you also another important principle called data destructuring, where we are saying, for example, we have a city and we have the code. Then we can say the city is Shirezi, and the code we can say it is a 1. So when this is interpreted, the value Shirezi is going to be assigned in the city and the value 1 is going to be assigned in the code. So you can have many of your variable names on the left and many of your values on the right, and the order of values on the left is going to determine the value stored to the variable on the left. It's called destructuring. Now, having talked about this, there's another thing which I have to warn you about, a common error in programming, or it can cause an unexpected logical error. Now, for example, before I explain what I want to explain, I want to show you what the current value of age is. Don't worry, I will explain printing later in another video. But for you to see what I want to show you, let me use some printings here. So age is 34. Why? Because we assigned a 34 to our age. Now, what is going to happen if we now come and say age is equals to 20? What do you think is going to happen? What is going to happen is that the value 34 is going to be replaced by 20 in the variable age. So you have to do this if it is your intention. If it is not, avoid overwriting variable values. you have to do this with care, because if we are going to print age again, you shall see a new value, which means that the old value is lost. So you have to override values if it is your intention. If it's not, avoid assigning a value in an already existing variable name. Now, this is all that we had to cover today. You have to stay tuned for more as more videos are coming. Remember to comment, remember to like, remember to share. And I ask you that as you are going through this, video, don't just watch it. Programming is best learned by practice. When you open your IDE, when you write the code, when you run the code, you are going to memorize the principles faster and understand it better than just watching a video. I hope you have learned a lot in this video. Keep well.